So a little bit of a Q&A amongst myself and all those on the phone and Naeem. And we're very fortunate to have Tim Londergan here from Tangibly. For those of you who are in the room present, you know who Naeem is. Naeem is a business and technology law partner in our Montreal office. He also deals with strategic solutions to his companies, especially in cross-border activities. He bridges civil law and common law jurisdictions, and I've worked with Naeem on many matters. So it's really a joy to be on the panel with him today. And he's just closing an M&A deal, so he does everything and investments as we speak. And he's one of our leaders of our AI group, which also has a huge component into trade secrets, and he'll speak a little bit about that. Beside him is our special guest of honor, Tim Londergan, who is the CEO and founder of Tangibly, a SaaS platform that enables companies to implement best-in-class management of their trade secrets. They help companies identify, track, and protect valuable trade secrets within their organizations. He's a serial entrepreneur who is passionate about technology, intellectual property, and innovation. And he has founded multiple companies, including a Seattle-based nanotechnology company, Lumera, which is now part of Renesas. He's led investments in many different areas, material science and intellectual ventures, and most recently founded a Singapore-based IP incubator, Wavefront Venture Labs. But what I love about Tim, and he'll talk to you a little bit about it later, is that when we were doing our trade secret group and developing our platform and our offerings, the first thing I said was, well, we can tell our clients to do all this, but how are they going to implement it? And thankfully, along came Tim, and we worked with him maybe now for the last year, and he has amazing insight on how people manage their information flow in quite an innovative and way and efficient way. So we'll hear from Tim in a moment. I don't know if I should start off with some of the points that I, as a strategist, that I sort of saw from this scenario.
Yeah, Anita, I think that would be great because, we've heard, the difficult job that our colleagues around the world have. How do we put them in a better position, right? So that maybe we can stop them already in China or already in other places. What are some of the things that we can think about, from a whole cycle standpoint?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of agreement work. So the one thing is to know what you're talking about, right? And the one thing in this case scenario, which is really interesting to me, is that they use the word know-how, and they use the word that it's valuable. Well, what is know-how? A few weeks ago, we gave a presentation to a university technology transfer group. And as you know, universities are amazing. They have awesome know-how. They can keep a secret for at least a little bit because they have to file patent applications, and they do, but they're increasingly getting collaborations with other companies. So how do they handle that? How do they know the trade secret versus know-how, and is there value in it? So we looked at their agreements, and if anybody's done agreements, if you look at the definition, if they have a definition of know-how or confidential information or trade secrets, a lot of the time it's very circular. So we came up with a sort of diagram. I don't know if who has the next one? Yeah. Nope, the one before that. There we go. So, and we actually thought about it with some colleagues, like, how do we explain what know-how and trade secrets and confidential information is? Because nobody totally understands. They use template, provisions. But it's really important to spend some time to identify what's valuable to you. What would you be upset about if Ethel went around the world and took some information? So obviously we know the whole thing about confidential information, right? We generally know what that is. Basically, it's that's information that's not well known, and usually in agreements, you have a paragraph of this and you have a whole bunch of exclusions, including things like, well, if you develop things independently, it's not, that's an exclusion to confidential information. Well, in this day and age of AI, and we'll have Tim talk to us about that, and Naeem, how do you know it was independent? How did you track that information? Then we have trade secrets, which obviously is all confidential, because that's the nature of a trade secret. And then we have know-how, and know-how could be secret, could be partially secret, could be something in somebody's head. It's still valuable, and our courts have recognized the know-how can be valuable, right? Even if it's not totally secret or totally confidential. Why? Because it's usually information that's known to a few people or developed through expertise. It may not be totally confidential, but it has value. It has value that if you knew that knowledge, if the person that you're licensing to doesn't have that knowledge, and that it would really help them to springboard their business, the courts have recognized that has value, and you can have an agreement on that. So the value of know-how depends on how many people know it, how many experts are there in the field, and how much the person really wants it, right? So, and there's a tricky thing with know-how, because how much is an employer's general know-how that's experience that they can take anywhere versus actually proprietary to your company. And you have to really think about how to mark that and how to define that. And I know it's hard to have a perfect box, but maybe, spend some time thinking about that. So that's just sort of my few takeaways from that point of view.
And in terms of the cycle, thinking about the cycle, right? We talked about enforcement, which is what happens at the very end. Could you talk to us a little bit more about exactly the cycle and management?
Yeah, I mean, the major question that we often get from CEOs is, do we have any trade secrets? What are they, right? How are we dealing with it? Are we, what information are we getting from other people? So the first thing is to basically do an audit. It's almost like a due diligence of your company, your procedures, talking with you with regard to what's important, right? And so we identify what you're doing, what you have, so you get a better knowledge of where your value is, right? And then afterwards, we figure out, well, geez, what policies do we need to put in place? Are they good enough? Do we need to do something else? We look at your agreements, your agreement clauses, because you may want to track what's going on and what you're giving and under what terms. And obviously, the huge part of this is training materials. You're going to be onboarding people. I mean, most of these things are employees. People are involved with things. Sometimes they're innocent because people don't even know that they're handling a trade secret. Sometimes it's not so innocent, like Ethel, because I'm pretty sure she knew what she was doing. And we look at what you can do. Like, I mean, Optimus was pretty good in many of the things that they did. And obviously the security guard was really well trained to say, oh, I saw these people. Who are they? And to actually turn his mind to what was happening. Now, could they have had better security? Maybe they should have had a 2-person login to take anything off of their main drive as opposed to 1. There's all these things that you can do, but you also have to be practical because the company still has to function, So those are the things that you have to balance. And obviously we implement it. We roll out the policies and agreements and training, and hopefully we have enough so that it enables our litigators to do what they did in this scenario and to act very quickly. And mostly it would likely work, aside from the fact that Ethel, for some reason, I don't know how she must have been trained in some sort of capabilities to have gotten through all those areas. But so basically that's what we do. Just turn your mind to it and making sure that you know what you're doing, know what you have, and know where your information is. It's kind of like knowing where your kids are. So I'll turn it over to Naeem, because I know he has a lot of input into this and dealing with his clients and giving them advice.
Yes, I would say, we're talking about this in a very rational way. Trade secret that's stolen is something that really rattles everyone in the company, right? And is going to have an impact on investors, is going to have an impact on everyone. And, I completely agree with everything that you've been saying, Anita. Sometimes, even with the best processes, right, what's missing is people, putting the emotion into it, if I can put it this way. People understanding, with passion, how important this is. And I think this is where training is so important, right? We've seen training with cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera. We see training with competition, antitrust issues, right? Do we have the same type of training with respect to trade secrets? And, there's so many different ways now, and I know that Tim is going to talk about this a bit more, but there are so many different ways that trade secrets can be, I guess, at risk. And so to me, it really is, okay, at the level of the board of directors, at the level of the C-suite that you're all working with, or maybe who you are, right? How do you, make sure that this is at the top of the list? And, this is why I thought this idea of a scenario with enforcement and having to go all around the world. Thankfully, we have a great team that can help with this, but, this is not an easy solution, right? And then if you start thinking, just about, again, valuation is something that will wake people up at the board of directors level, right? Competitive edge. Those are points that were in your previous slide, right? And the idea with valuation of intellectual property, everyone knows this, is that it's something that is very dynamic. People think about an IP strategy. They don't just think about trade secrets in a silo and then about patents in a silo, right? And the value of a trade secret, well, it only has value as long as it remains a secret, right? That sounds very basic, but when you think about developments, for example, in artificial intelligence, right, you need to think about all of those things that may look boring to some people at the C-suite level, but are really important. Go back to your audit. Is my take, with developments in AI, is my trade secret really a trade secret still? How do I need to update my policies and agreements to deal with these issues, right? Thinking about vendors, also thinking about clients, and thinking about interactions with employees, et cetera. One of the things that would worry me if I was on a board of directors level is, if I have to enforce, does that mean that I'm going to disclose a trade secret in court? And then, what happens, right? So there's a lot of things there. On artificial intelligence, and just going back to this, when I work with some of my wonderful, IP colleagues on this, on strategy, and some of them are in the room today, it really is, when you talk about a trade secret, it's something that cannot be easily reverse engineered, right? Well, with developments in AI, ChatGPT or everything else, has it now automatically become much easier to reverse engineer what you thought was a trade secret, right? And with this, you have to maybe change and rush to say, well, maybe what we wanted to keep as a trade secret, we need to, think about whether it is, patentable, or there's another way to protect it. I'm worried about, reverse engineering, sometimes even with unwitting, actions of employees playing around with AI, right? Someone who may be working on their home computer and then wants to prepare for an important meeting and says, well, I have this, we have this important business idea, long-term business strategy. What are the best ways to, to prepare my meeting, right? For this. And it sounds like nothing, but then you hear about, and you may have heard about data breaches relating to ChatGPT, for example, and other types of issues. And so it becomes much easier to make a massive mistake. That's how I would put it with AI. And so I think it's important this is where you kind of have to think about it and think about those nightmare scenarios that wake us up all at night, and go back to these trade secret management policies, agreements, etc. And are we protected enough, or do we need to think about other things? The other thing is it needs to work, right? You need to have a solid way to make sure that it works, and Tim is going to talk about this. The other thing is that you could have a situation where AI, and this I'm going in a bit of a more indirect way. Here you had an issue of the USB key, right? What if someone attacks your mainframe? No one took anything out of the with a USB key, but someone is attacking the mainframe. With AI advances, as you know, it's becoming easier for malicious actors to actually attack your mainframe. So again, when you're thinking about trade secrets and what are your barriers to trade secrets, you need to think about how AI is addressing this. Or another thing is, what if, and this comes from Tim, actually, all credit goes to Tim. We were talking a lot about this question. It's so interesting to speak with. What if, someone just asks ChatGPT, Optimus has this, trade secret. We know there's a patent here, there's a trade secret there, there's a patent here, right, in your whole strategy. Help me understand what should make the link, right, with what is currently secret. And so this one is really interesting because people are using AI to figure out your trade secret without stealing anything away from you. They're just asking and finding information, right? So that makes the definition of a trade secret that Céline was talking about, right? Some of the issues, sometimes you go with, theft. Michael, you were talking about this, Ivy also, or other means to secure the trade secret. But what if you really have to rely on the fact that it is indeed a trade secret, right? To me, that's something that's quite important. The last point that I'm going to talk about, we could talk about this all day, right, is a question that I have. I ask a lot of questions, and I know you do too, and I'm sure Louis and others will have those questions. How do you address trade secrets in an age where the current regulatory focus is on explainability of AI? And so, as you know, in AI, in different, algorithms, sometimes design of neural nets, et cetera, you're going to have a strategy where you will have trade secrets as opposed to another IP protection strategy. But now with the current regulatory focus, you need to be able to explain how your AI works. If you go to court and you use AI for something, right, and you want to make sure that you're not at fault, you need to be able to explain that it wasn't the AI's, it's not the AI that caused the issue, right? And so you have a tension, and this is a tension with, keeping trade secrets a real secret while being able to explain enough to now comply with those new regulatory advances that we have all over the world, right? We were talking with Rinaldo and Maria Chiara about Italy and ChatGPT developments in AI just before this, right? Bill C-27 in Canada, which is currently at second reading, automated decision-making rules that are already in effect in Quebec. There's a lot going on in this. And I think that's why I think if you needed a reason to think again about this important process, I think AI may be just what is already on the minds of your board of directors and your C-suite. And it, helps them to focus on, okay, do I still have a competitive edge? Is my valuation still there? And what can I do to protect myself?
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, if you want to convince a CEO of the value, I had clients coming back from JP Morgan saying, we need a trade secret policy, because that's all we have is trade secrets, and we have lots of investors. And we need a trade secret policy. I said, okay, we can do that. So that's a great lead in to what Tim and his company Tangibly do as to, okay, you're here. How do we make this manageable for companies? And you've seen lots of different things and what you're developing, and you're extremely knowledgeable. So perhaps you can provide us with some insights.
So the first thing I'll say is I had an investor reach out just a few weeks ago, and he sent me a screenshot of a deck that he had just gotten. And he was like, this is the first time I've seen this, which was, it talked about the intellectual property, and it had a big, all the patent numbers. And then it said, 436 trade secrets, right? And so I think if I look back in the history of Tangibly, which is an almost 3-year-old company now, 3 years ago, people still looked at me a little sideways when I said they're building a SaaS platform for trade secrets. I was like, what are you talking about, right? And so things have come a long, long way in the last 3 years. And so I'd say, like at the outset, trade secret SaaS, what's it really mean? We kind of have architected this platform around a lot of the key themes we've heard here today, which is we think about number one, asset. So what is it? Number two, who has access to it? So it's an identity profile. And then number three, it's a contract with that identity, be it a person or a company. What's that contract actually say? What's it sort of designed to do? So those are kind of like the what we kind of think of as the triumvirate of trade secrets, those three things. And then the two things that we do on the platform is that we provide training, number one. And so that training can be for the employees, it could be for the partners, whoever you want it to be for, right? Let's just sort of like create a common vernacular amongst the company so we all understand this stuff. And then the other thing we do, which again, over the course of 3 years, I think people become a little more comfortable with, is the idea of saying what we preach is, hey, if someone has access to your trade secrets, just tell them it's a trade secret, right? Be very explicit, basically put them on notice. And so we've built this workflow to achieve that. And so that's kind of the sort of the guts of the system. Anita had asked me, what does implementation look like, right? And how hard is it? And what I'd say is, we're still a young company, and this is still very much of a developing market. And so we've seen everything, right? So we have companies that come to us, they already have a spreadsheet, they know they want a solution, they see what we do and they go, okay, that's great. And so that implementation path, again, let's say a small and medium company, within a month, they're sort of up and running and everything's kind of humming. And then we work through law firms as well. And so sometimes the law firm will be an implementation partner for the client. And then if I just sort of go to the other side of the spectrum, let's take a Fortune 100, right? So at the sort of Fortune 100 size, which we've probably got about half a dozen of those conversations going, and they range from like analysis paralysis, like this is such an enormous problem at a company the size of, name a Fortune 100, back to something actionable. And so what we're starting to see now is this idea that the one thing that a lot of big companies have in common, the big risk that they see with trade secrets, and it bears out in litigation data, is actually contamination risk, right? And so it's like, I'm taking in information, oftentimes from much smaller companies. How am I handling it? Am I really living up to the terms of the contract that I just signed? Have I ever really destroyed any information that was given to me? Probably not. So we're seeing these point solutions where people need tools to handle the inflow of information. How's it being marked? Who really has access to it? And then what happens upon sort of disposal? So that's one. And then the other one where we're seeing bigger companies say there's a point solution here is really in diligence for M&A, right? Which is, hey, we're going to go buy this company, small company somewhere around the world. We don't know, once we sign the deal exactly what the trade secrets are, but we didn't go get them, right? So we know kind of roughly what they are. Now let's kind of take this big step and go sort of document everything, right? And so that's kind of been an interesting one to see. Again, it doesn't take, the board of directors to say, thou shalt do this. This is sort of, someone in legal department saying, we're going to go implement this for this very small thing. So what I see is like those kind of motions at big companies, that's going to start to also just raise awareness within the company as well. So.
Yeah, I've seen that. I'm working on a deal that they've spent a few months working at, their various different fields of, each party has brought to the table trade secrets. They want to develop things.
Yeah.
And there was no clear delineation. So they've had to spend some time Otherwise, it's gonna be a mess once you start working and trying to figure this out. So at least having some rules, maybe putting some more specific provisions in your agreements as to processes, and how you figure these things out may help you avoid expensive solutions later on. So is there anything else, Tim, that you've seen that you'd like to add, your last words, and then we'll.
Oh, just this whole AI topic, because, I think we'll all look back on this time and go, wow, that was wild, right? And it's going to play out for the next few years. So if you're still early to the conversation, it's early days. But so we've been at it, and I was glad to sort of see the Optimus use case as being really the trade secret was the heating and cooling process, right? So we've built some of our own AI on top of large language models, and we're going to make a big announcement next week. So this is sort of the pre-announcement. So we've taken some of that logic, right? And we've started this some time ago. And as a chemist by background, I always think about heating and cooling processes, right? And so, we knew that the way patents are often drafted is to obfuscate the trade secret, right? And so with trained eyes, you can kind of look at a patent claim and say, well, there's probably a trade secret here, right? So we started building that type of logic into our own AI, and then using the power of these large language models to then basically ingest a patent and come out the other end of it with basically a trade secret roadmap, right? And so, it's not as good as telling you the exact heating and cooling process, but it can kind of direct you to the heating and cooling process, right? So
what may be important, because obviously it's an important technology that you're patenting.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think that kind of comes back to this implementation question. So what we're seeing is it's just, it's an easy way for people to get their heads around, the stuff they know they have some trade secrets, but like, where is it? What is it? It's going to be a powerful way to help people sort of understand what to start to focus on to get started. So. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you to our panelists. I mean, I just wanted to take us back to a little bit of the scenario and saying, yeah, for the purposes of today and the demonstration, we probably could have gotten ethyl maybe a bit sooner than in France, but it was a great way to demonstrate the importance of, and I've spoken to a lot of, many of you are counsel, but in different countries, and a lot of it is knowing how to enforce your rights internationally. And hopefully today you've gotten some creative solutions. That it can be seamless from one country to the other, as long as you're on top of it, and have professionals who know what they're doing. And it's also important to know that to be ready for those situations, what are you going to do? Again, if I'm looking at a lot of the cases, some of them are just employees not knowing. Some of them are employees actively trying to benefit. So having those training systems in place, communicating to your partners, communicating to your employees on how best to handle information and when information has to be handled, and how important it is and how serious it is to go to a competitor or whatever, or start up their own business or a new joint venture. Hopefully we gave you a little bit of a taste for that. So thanks for coming.